Well, it's finally here. The 126th Inter-Parliamentary Union is scheduled to be officially kick off on Saturday at the Commonwealth Resort in Munyonyo. And as members of parliament from more than 100 countries arrive in Uganda, little or even nothing may be known of the union established in 1986. Now, the IPU, which aims at fostering the exchange of experience among parliaments and parliamentarians of all countries sitting here in Kampala for the first time, has a 7-item agenda. However, key on its agenda will be the consideration by legislators by vote on the inclusion of an emergency debate on the situation in Syria, calling for an immediate end to violence and human rights abuses. Critics, however, describe the meet that brings together over 2,000 delegates as more of a talk shop, since most parliaments in the world largely represent the government's positions due to the ruling party numbers in the House. Tonight, we seek to know whether the IPU conference will implement the resolutions adopted and whether the union, whose decision can really have an impact in the well-being of the society. Well, our guests tonight on this special edition of On the Sport are the IPU Secretary General, Anders Johnson, and the host of the 126th IPU Assembly, the Speaker of Uganda's Parliament, Rebecca Kadaga Aritwala. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, and you're watching On the Sport. Honorable Speaker and Secretary General, thank you so much for your time off this very busy schedule to join us. You're On the Sport, and I will begin with you as the host. Impressed so far? Because as organizer, I'm sure you have lots of meetings, you have agendas to meet and programs to meet. Satisfied so far?
I think satisfied is a small word. I think I'm overwhelmed. One, by the turn-up and by the enthusiasm. I think it's great for the country.
Are we ready?
We were ready 1 year ago.
So all systems are set to go.
Everything's rolling.
All right. And Anders, your impression of our beautiful country so far?
Oh, I love it. It's I know your country a little bit, so. But
not your first time here.
It is not my first time here. But let me say that I'm very impressed with the preparations that have been made. I'm very impressed with the reaction we get from the people of Uganda and how warmly they receive us. And I know that we're going to have a very, very good and successful conference here.
All right. You have actually been in the IPM for more than 20 years. Mm-hmm. So is it true, like I said in my introduction, it's little known, especially in my country, Uganda. Mm-hmm. We seem to have let it go for about the 1 year when she announced it was coming, and we were putting it in page 3 and 4 in the media, and probably story 5 or 6 on television. Is that where it belongs? Because now it seems we have generated the impact and everyone seems to know about the IPU, but is that where it belongs in terms of impact and relevance in society?
You know, I think it deserves to be a lot better known than it is, that's for sure. The organization has an interesting past, but it has a much more interesting role in the world today. And I'd like to pick up something you said in your introductory statement when you talk about parliamentarians as just being this being a talk shop and, you know, parliaments just representing governments. Well, the one very particular idea about the IPU is that it represents, contrary to all intergovernmental meeting, it actually represents the political diversity that exists in all parliaments. So if you want to have the temperature of politics in the world today, the best place to go to is actually in the IPU, because that's where you get the diversity of opinions. And when we have adapted our strategy, to our working methods to suit that. So when members vote on resolutions, for example, it reflects much better what the politics of the world are today on that particular issue, because we split votes, we can vote, part of the delegation can vote in accordance with their political conviction as opposed to where their governments stand on a particular issue.
And have you seen impact, especially when you vote on a resolution in the various IPUs, that impact actually falls and then is replicated in the various parliaments or in the various countries where the resolutions are made?
I can give you plenty of examples where it does. But we should not delude ourselves. One of the effects of these assemblies and the use of these assemblies is in fact the the decisions that it takes in the resolutions it adopts. But they do have more or less the same status as resolutions of the General Assembly. In other words, they are recommendations addressed to countries. And many of the recommendations are actually addressed to parliaments themselves. And that is, I think, where the particular, these resolutions are helpful, because they suggest approaches to take through legislation, through oversight, through the budget process, which are then helpful to countries. And there are plenty of examples where actually decisions or resolutions in the IPU have then led to legislative action in various parliaments in the world.
All right. Let's look at some of the key issues to be discussed in the 126th IPU conference, and of course key among them, and this is something also extremely personal for you, maternal health and child health care. Why now? Because it seems an issue that should have probably been discussed in the first IPU conference, and why now? Is there a critical issue now to be addressed, and a position that should be made by the IPU, a strong statement now?
Yeah, the beauty of the IPU is that it has some of the best, it has some of the middle, and it has some of the worst. So today, I think 68 member countries of the IPU are far from meeting the MDGs. So it is relevant. And then sitting here in Kampala, 1 year ago, the heads of state of the African Union came to Kampala and declared the decade of maternal health for the African woman. So it is something relevant to the third world. So we think it's being discussed at the right time, in the right place.
We still have issues, especially in the developing world, and especially the least developed countries, where obviously the numbers seem to be dim. The percentage of women, actually, the campaign now is do not have a woman die giving life. The number of women who lose their lives giving birth, and the number of children, the child mortality rate is still extremely high. Is this, for a developed country or those developed countries, an issue that should now be addressed and is now being looked at? Especially, it seems all conferences around the world, the UN and yourself now in the IPU, seem to be giving it priority. Is like she says, now is the time, but do we have the platform now to address these issues and have them listened to by the various governments that you represent and that will be here at the IPU?
I think now is the time. We started a campaign in the IPU in 2008, particularly to have parliaments understand and beware of the Millennium Development Goals relating to maternal, child and infant health. And we have done work with parliaments, and what we will be doing here is to look at some of the success stories and to share that with other parliaments to serve as inspiration for what they can do. What we know, and this is not unique to the IPU, is that what we do know is that if we really want to attain development in all countries, we have to make sure that we address gender inequality. And where the gender inequality, one of the areas where it's the most glaring is in the area of health. And for as long as we don't make sure that mothers and women and sisters have access to health, we are doing ourselves a huge disservice in our development approach. So
Okay.
it is important that we do this, and I think we have something to showcase here, and we will be able to make further progress in the coming years, because the debate here is not a standalone event. It is a debate to continue actually working then with parliaments in individual countries.
All right, Speaker, 7 days or 6 days of a conference, to those who say this is little time to discuss key issues that affect, what, over 100 countries? Questions are, if you set out an agenda, I know you will break up into different committees and discuss some of the key issues according to your program, but when we talk about maternal mortality and child health care, the questions are being raised. Are you going to be discussing, after you've looked at the various examples and obviously success stories in other countries, budget, increase in budgets, is that the way you have a proper program to say that this is how we're going to look at maternal mortality and we need to address it now, so that probably when we meet in the 127th IPU, this shouldn't be a key issue to discuss?
Yeah, the way the IPU works, we begin by agreeing on a topic. Then we assign 2 or 3 colleagues to do some research. Then they send it to all the member countries for their views. And then we keep the dialogue for 1 year. So the final dialogue on the draft resolution will take place in Kampala, so that all those who have ideas to contribute will be able to make them here in Kampala, so that we can have the final text.
All right. As the Secretary General, let me take you on in terms of what you have in store for us as we go ahead. You have 7 days, probably 6 days really, for deliberations. What's key on the agenda? I might be talking about maternal mortality, but the people in Uganda need to know that the delegates in this country will actually discuss more than just maternal mortality.
I don't know how much people are aware of the life of a member of parliament. If there is one category of people who are multitasking, it's a member of parliament. The myriad of things that a member of parliament does in a day, in attending meetings, in having bilateral discussions, in having talks, it is really I won't say profession, but it's really an activity which is extraordinary. So what they will do during these 6 or 7 days here, it is not just a couple of discussions and debates leading to a few resolutions. There is going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of bilateral meetings between representatives of political parties in different countries. They will negotiate and discuss and learn from each other and also influence each other. There is, in the course of these discussions, going to be lots of debates about how we can help Parliament. The IPU has a whole activity that takes place in the course of a year in which we help strengthen and build parliamentary institutions, how we defend the human rights of members of Parliament. We visit jails to visit and we negotiate the release of detained members, often of the opposition. We do a lot of work to promote gender equality and women's participation in politics. All of that work, which takes place throughout the year in very concrete capacity building terms, is sustained through these assemblies where we discuss, we learn lessons, we negotiate, etc. So what you see is the debate on which emergency item are we going to discuss. What you see is the debate on the standing item committees on whether it is health or it is drawing the lessons from what the Arab Spring and what has followed that, or other issues. But underneath that, there is a extraordinary wealth of activities that are taking place, and which will then have repercussions and follow-up throughout the year.
All right, we're going to take a very short break, but when we come back, we'll be discussing another very key issue. You touched on it, the Arab Spring uprising, and of course, human rights. Let's take a very short break. You're watching a very special edition of On the Spot on the IPU conference. Don't go away.